Well, I've come to the conclusion that there are two perceptions of reality. Right? There's a religious perception of reality, and there's a spiritual perception of reality. The religious perception of reality is about guilt, sin, and blame, and that's the trap. That's the chains that holds every citizen. Spiritual perception of reality is about responsibility. We're all responsible. We're not guilty, we're responsible. And it's trying to make our way through these two perceptions of reality. That seems to be the biggest problem we're confronted with as human beings on the planet right now. Because the religious perception of reality is about dominance. It's not about responsibility. It's about subservience and male authoritarian figures. And the religious perception of reality is about life, and respect, and responsibility. I think that the New World Order is marching on. You know, to me, in my own mind, it comes closer and closer that it is very real, that even though Germany and the Axis lost World War II, I don't think that the Nazis did. I think that the Nazis won World War II. And I think that their authoritarian methods of behavior control, mind manipulation, converting human spirit into energy so that they can feed the need for their technology, I think all of this stuff is just moving right on down the line here. And I think that there really is no political solution or an economic solution that exists right now. And I think that we need to get a clear perception of reality and where we are in reality, and take responsibility. And by using our intelligence, intelligently, create the solutions that we need to create. Because right now, I mean, we're just more fuel. You know, somewhere under the religious perception of reality, a decision was made that the earth was the dominion of man, and man therefore could plunder the earth, that man could take whatever they wanted from the earth. But somewhere in the progress of this mindset, man has forgotten that we are part of the earth. And just the way that this system that technologic man has devised to take the resources of the earth and turn them into fuel and energy, they've taken our spirit and they're turning it through their process of civilization, taking our spirit and turning it into energy to run their system. We need to remember that what happens to the earth happens to us. You know, and I'm not advocating anyone's politics or any of it. To me, it's just all, you know. So I think that we've got to just continue to do the best that we can do. And that's what I'm trying to do.
By the early 19th century, the U.S. was rapidly growing, both in size and power. Land-hungry and ambitious, the new country was also drastically changing its policies towards the Indian nations. And nowhere was this more evident than in the treaties.
The United States' primary interest in treaty making was to acquire Indian land. And so the treaties were used for that purpose, especially as the United States found itself in a position to pretty much dictate the terms of the treaty. And so the treaties morphed from this friendship and reciprocity sort of relationship into a very one-sided thing.
There's almost a mythology about this, that somehow when the Pilgrims arrived, they were dragging land behind them. There was no land brought here. The land here was Native nations. And this is what the United States needed. It's what it wanted. They wanted all of it. They wanted everything.
The greed came in. Well, we have a little tract here now we need a little more. And, well, we need to go make another treaty. We didn't understand that eventually those treaty-making processes ended up to the acquisition of all of our ancestral homeland. that land was a part of us. That land helped us be. That land was who we were and who we are.
The command of removal came unexpectedly upon most of us. There was a time that we noticed several overloaded wagons were passing our home, yet we did not grasp the meaning. Then one day, wagons stopped. We were to be taken away and leave our homes, never to return.
To get what they wanted, U.S. officials brokered treaties through any means available. Their tactics were so corrupt that the once trusted treaties became quickly known as bad paper.
There were people at these treaty negotiations who would do anything to get an agreement on the table. And so there was very routinely bribery, individual payments made to tribal leaders. Alcohol would be used to put people in an agreeable frame of mind, and even coercion to say to people, you must sign this agreement or else.
Every means of trickery and fraud was employed against Native nations. The United States would appoint a false leadership, people who had no right to speak for the tribe, and say, you're the leader of this tribe, sign this paper giving away all your land.
As the century progressed, the treaties became more and more lopsided, a far cry from the parallel paths of the Goswenta. Despite appeals from the Indian nations, the U.S. kept on its new trajectory, rationalizing its aggressive actions along the way.
They have neither the intelligence, the industry, the moral habits, nor the desire of improvement. The tribes of Indians inhabiting this country were fierce savages. To leave them in possession of their country was to leave the country a wilderness.
It's important in the great American mythology to describe the Americas as wilderness. Because of its wilderness, then there's really nobody to dispossess. It was okay to come here and prosper and conveniently forget that there were already people and civilizations in place.
At first we had something to eat, but that gave out and we were starving. We came to a slippery elm tree and ate the bark of that. Lots took sick and died.
As Americans successfully pushed the bounds of the frontier, they not only believed that they were destined to take over the land and prosper, they believed that God was the one who put them there to do it.
They believed that it was God's will, that the United States should be a continental nation, stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. As each wave of immigration would come, they'd move into an area. The United States would then make some sort of arrangement with the tribe to get that land from them. And then more would come, and they'd advance the frontier even further.
The power of manifest destiny, of expansion, of inevitability, of God's providence helped to rally people around not only the idea of Americans as entitled to North America, but rallied them around the idea that Indian people were barriers to civilization and barriers to progress.
No matter how many treaties were signed or how much land they gave to the United States, the Indian was still in the way. This was known as the Indian problem. This so-called problem continued despite a decades-old policy to force Indians to swap their land east of the Mississippi for land west of it. The Indians would then move to those western parts and away from the Americans. This plan was simply called removal.
The Removal Act was the centerpiece of Andrew Jackson's political agenda, and it was very controversial at the time. It was very widely debated. There was lots of discussion across the country, and very many prominent people spoke up against it.
Will the American government steal? Will it lie? Will it kill? I have no desire to see the poor remnants of a once powerful people. The removal bill represents oppression with a vengeance.
The removal process, it was, all right, you've made these treaties. Now, you can have one of two things. You can keep your sovereignty, but you can't keep your land. But if you keep your land, then you have to assimilate and no longer be Indian. You will have sovereignty or you have your land. You can't have both.
Across the United States, the Removal Act divided the country. But across the Indian nations, reaction was unanimous.
We are surrounded by white people, and there are encroachments made. What assurances have we that similar ones will not be made on us should we remove to the Mississippi? Look here, Father. Our lands belong to us. We shall keep them. We do not wish to talk to you anymore.
We had already been fighting to keep that land. And sure enough, when the government was coming in there to take us out of that land, we fought even more. But at some point, you have to realize that this fighting is all going to be about death. And death is coming. Then I need to be protecting my family. And I want my children to survive. So we have to endure this removal.
Many of the tribes did choose to accept removal as a means of maintaining the tribal nation. What choice was there? After decades of engagement, they could no longer resist. And so they gave up their lands, they gave up their homes, they gave up their fields and forests, they gave up literally their way of life in order to be able to stay together and be what they were.
We are poor, but we are free. No white man controls our footsteps.
Some try to assimilate to avoid removal. Some were removed completely. But in the end, every nation met the same fate. Every nation had to give up land.
Brothers, you cannot remain where you are now. You have but one remedy within your reach, and that is to remove to the west. May the Great Spirit teach you how to choose.
The loss of land was devastating, and so was the loss of lives. The most famous of these incidents was the Cherokee Nation's Trail of Tears, but there were numerous other trails just as violent and just as crushing.
Everyone had to walk. My baby brother Joel was 4 years old. I was just 8, but I took my turn at carrying him because he could not walk much. I would get so tired I'd think I was going to die, but I would hang on to him. I was so afraid they would kill him. I saw them kill babies who were too big to be carried and would give out.
That really was a road of death. People were falling on the side of the road or being shot or being murdered on the road and being left there. The removal process was done in a way that was not efficient in making people survive.
Of the millions of Indian people that lived before the first colonists arrived, by the end of the 19th century, only 250,000 remained.
The removal of a tribe was certain to destroy all of the things they knew about taking care of themselves, all of their medicines, all of their foods. Everything about them had to change in order to survive. It can only be understood as an act of destruction.
When you move a people from one place to another, when you displace people, when you wrench people from their homelands, wasn't that genocide? We don't make the case that there was genocide. We know there was, yet here we are.
When we were forced to leave our land, we took the fires with us. We took the embers along. Then when we got to Oklahoma, we rekindled the old fire. Old home or new home, it is the same fire.
So there's this obvious imbalance here. if you were going to try to describe it to a young person or to a visitor who got here 5 minutes ago to Earth and had no clue, how would you describe what the problem is here?
They have entered the reality of the already dead who are just spending their lives waiting to die. The reality of the spiritually disconnected. This is the reality that seems to be prevalent, because it's like you look at the leadership or you look at the institutions or the things that are held up in these esteems, and none of these things seem to have any spiritual relationship to life. You know, so it's like no spiritual relationship to life. It's almost like no spiritual recognition. We're in a time in reality where the human beings that are now on the human beings, at least in the technologic world, no longer remember the original dream. They no longer remember their ancestors or the teachings or the knowledge. They no longer have these things of their ancestry. So it's almost like they're spiritually disconnected from the past. And when you look at the situations the conditions that we live in now, with the way that, you know, the way that the cancers of greed and war, the way that these viruses, these diseases have spread, and no one is really taking responsibility to to effectively deal with these things. I mean, people are having emotional reactions and emotional outbursts and these types of things, but no one's taking clear and coherent action to deal with this disease of aggression that is taking place. So it's almost like, because of that, it's almost like they have no spiritual relationship to their own descendants. So it's like, you know, so no spiritual relationship to the past, the ancestry. No spiritual relationship to the ancestry in the shape of the future. So whatever this disease of aggression and violence and greed and whatever this diseased mentality is that lives in this life system now, it's eating up the spirit of the diseased. They don't even know it's happening. They have no relationship to being. They only function and react as humans. They have no relationship to being. Being always is. This is how we're with our ancestry and with our descendants, being. When we leave as humans, we go back to being, human being. That really means something. But we live in a reality now, we're in a time where I would say to anyone, you know, protect your spirit. Protect your spirit, because you're in the place where spirits get eaten.
We are going through an identity crisis as human beings. We don't identify and recognize ourselves or participate in this reality from the perceptual reality of a human being. We do it from gender, we do it from race, we do it from religion, we do it from blah, blah, blah. We do it from all these different things, but we don't participate in this reality with the perceiving reality as a human being. And no matter how you look at race, gender, or any of the other things that we participate, class, any of these other things, every one of those things participates in reality from some form of feeling as though they're a victim. It's just psychologically programmed in. So we need to remember that we're human beings. We need to think and feel and see like human beings, because that's what the whole industrialized civilizing process was about and is about, is to erase our ability to recognize ourselves as human beings. This is about altering perceptual reality. This is how you change spiritual perceptions of reality. You get the human being to no longer understand being a human being, and then you've altered their spiritual reality, man, and you really have major big time, and after that it's always about catch up. It's a human being. So we need to remember that. Whatever it is that we're dealing with, we need to think like human beings. Our power. And this is where it's important to understand about being a human being, because we don't recognize ourselves as a human. If we recognize ourselves as human beings, human, bone, flesh, and blood. All right? Is made up of the DNA. Our DNA, we're made up of the metals, minerals, and liquids of the earth. We are shapes of the earth. We have being. All things of the earth are made up of they have the same DNA. Everything of the earth. Same metals, minerals, and liquids make everything of the earth. Everything of the earth has being. We all have being. Our being comes from our relationship to the sun, sky, universe. It's literally like sunlight. That's like the sperm that brings life to the water-bearing womb that is the earth. So our relationship as human beings to the reality of power is in our relationship to that reality. You know, being, our power. All right? So we're in this perceptual and technologic reality where we know that they can take the flesh and blood that's called uranium and put it through a mining process in the fossils and convert its being into a form of energy to run a system. Well, they do that to us. Take the being part of human, right? And through mining our minds, through the indoctrination and programming of how to perceive reality, they use our intelligence. They use our minds, all right, to mine the energy, our being, and turn it into a form of energy to run their system. And they do this because we're human beings. This is why we have to remember who we are. Now we know that when you take the other life forms, being is a life form. So whether it's a stone life form, when you take the other life forms, right, and you put them through this mining process, it leaves behind poison and toxic waste. And we're aware of that. Well, when you mine the being part of human, all right, it leaves behind poison and toxic waste. And the poison and toxic waste are the fears, the doubts, and the insecurities, all right, that become a part of our perceptional reality. So once the mining has taken place, we no longer remember we're human beings, and we're participating in reality based upon our perception of reality through our inabilities. Our fears, our doubts, and our insecurities. Get behind the bravado. I mean, away from the bravado and the mask and all the paint and stuff, right? Down to the reality. Basically, we participate in this reality based upon our perception of our inabilities. Now, take that, all right? Now, how many of you have ever had a moment of feeling powerless when you were sitting in a room, all right, or had this feeling powerless, all right? And through your fears and your doubts and your insecurities, how bad can you make yourself feel? And then, how does that affect the people around you? All right? Well, there's an obvious contradiction here. You're not powerless. We've just been programmed to believe we're powerless while we're using our power, all right, to disrespect ourselves and everything around us in a negative way. And every bit of that was programmed into how we perceive reality. So it's not about powerlessness. It's about recognizing who we are and using that power in a healthy way. So it's really an issue of coherence. If we understand that we're human beings and we access our power through clear and coherent use of our intelligence, then we manifest. All right, then we can create and manifest the reality that we need. And we have to understand we do it all the time, because if we sit around and make ourselves feel miserable, then we're manifesting that reality. See, so it's just a matter of a slight perception, shift of perception of how we perceive reality. The power of our intelligence. See, now, and everyone that wants a spiritual relationship to life, and whatever the spiritual quest is, to me, in my own mind, and I mean no disrespect to anybody, you know, to me, it isn't going to be real to the Creator until we use the gifts that the Creator gave us in the way the Creator gave them to us. See, all of it's lip service. You know, well, I'm sorry, but lip service isn't going to synchronize us with our power. To show respect to our Creator, then we need to show the respect. We need to respect the intelligence our Creator gave us and use it clearly and coherently. See, this is how the prayers get answered. This is how the thing starts to happen. Because we're adding we're introducing coherency into the reality of energy. If there's anything that this predator energy fears, anything that they fear, it's a clear, coherent, thinking human being. They don't care if you got a gun, a bomb. They don't care if you hijack air. They don't care about any of that, because they got more guns, more bombs, more airplanes. They invented the guns, the bombs, and the airplanes. They don't care. See, because that feeds into the energy of chaos and incoherence. To use the intelligence as clearly and coherently as possible. Now, so a part of the programming has taken effect. A part of the way that it has worked is they have turned the human beings into citizens and religions and things. All right, but they have taken away our ability to think. I mean, they haven't really taken it away because the ability's there, but they've taken away our understanding that we have that ability. They have replaced thinking with believing. All right? Now, just your own little poll as you wander around reality, how many times do you hear people say, I think, versus how many times do you hear people say, I believe? Well, believing and thinking, they're two different things. All right? All right? And actually, believe has a lie right in the middle. All right? Think about that. Because actual reality is, if I believe, I mean in reality, that means I don't know. Why don't I just say it? If you believe, that means you don't know. But you won't go around and have conversations with people saying, I don't know this, I don't know that. So you just go around and say, well, I believe this, I believe that. It's a nice little trick, but it's just keeping us completely disconnected from the reality of our power. See, it's like it's a vibratory, everything about energy, it's a vibratory reality. I mean, we project electromagnetic thought in scientific terms, right? So everything. So words are sounds that we make. See, and thoughts are things, our thoughts are it's a different kind of sound that we're sending out there. And it has its own vibratory thing. So the words that we make, the sounds that we make should have something to do, I think, all right, in a tonal way, vibrating with what the thinking is doing. See, so I think that they created language, see, that they alter these. Am I confusing? No. That's good. so I think they've taken language, see, and they've created certain words, sounds, that neutralize what's being thought. Just in the vibratory thing, because everything's about energy. So, and as an example, so when I sit around and say I believe this and I believe that, that means I'm not going to think about it. It just means, plain and simply put, I'm not going to think about it. Because I already believe it. And that's the way the thinking process gets shut down. Because when we look at the situation that we're in individually within our lives, and the predator thing is there and it's very real, and I mean, it cannot be ignored away. But when we look at our own lives, whether it's in our individual lives or what's going on around us, how much coherency am I bringing to the table? Or how much am I bringing to the table that is basically based upon my beliefs? And there's a distinction between, see, I think we should think and feel with our feelings. I don't think we should believe and emotionally react to our beliefs about the reality of our power, synchronizing with our power, all right? Because we can outthink them. It's the only chance we have. We'll never outfight them. We can outthink them. That's why they fear coherence. Like the 17,000 page thing. I know what I did. I'm just crazy, and I lived crazy and was wild, and I got away with as much as I could. But I didn't really commit any crimes. You know what I mean? Well, technically. And I represented no threat. So why would they do all these papers? Because I have the ability occasionally to be coherent. And usually it works in front of people. The incoherent stuff got its own. They don't like a lot of people around. But it made me think, well, because all I did was think. All I did was talk. But see, there's something in there, so they don't want us thinking. They want us to vote. They don't want us to think, right? Right? They want us to. They want us to have unsynchronized communications with the Creator. So that's what they gave us religion for, right? So we couldn't synchronize our communication with the Creator, right? Because in reality, our communication with the Creator is between us and the Creator. And it's how we participate in this reality. In religion, there's a difference between spiritual and religion. Spirituality is about responsibility. And that's, use your intelligence clearly and coherently, the way Creator wanted us to. Responsibility. Religion is about irresponsibility. Because in responsibility, you take responsibility. Right? In religious indoctrination, you give up responsibility when you agree that there's something wrong with you for being born, and therefore you have to submit to the authority and chain of command. Then you're giving up responsibility. And so it's kind of devious. See, so many people, it's about keeping us from synchronizing our energy and our coherency. So there are many millions and millions of people that are trying to going through religion because they think that's going to create the solution, but in the end it gets neutralized in many ways, because as an example, you've got all these, I'll use the Catholic Church and I'm not, this is just news, and I'm reporting the news. This whole pedophile thing that's been going on. So you got all these good Catholic people that are out there praying, they want good stuff, but the gangsters at the top, they're over there having fun with the little boys and girls. Something messed up here. See, so for the people, pray to the Creator. Just pray to the Creator. It's between us and the Creator. And understand that that's really any communication that's spiritually really going to happen. It's going to happen between us like that. We don't need that middleman. And we don't. And the other thing is not to judge anything. It's not our right to judge. It's our responsibility to recognize the reality of the situation and make clear, coherent decisions based upon the reality of the situation that we recognize. If we're going to go around judging things, then we'll never recognize it because our look at it is limited by our judgments.
In mid-October of 1964, kissing cousins Elizabeth and Philip paid a royal visit to a Catholic residential school for Aboriginal children in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. William Coombs was 12 years old at the time of the royal visit. "I was an inmate at the Kamloops school when we were visited," said Coombs. "I remember it was strange because they came by themselves, no big fanfare or nothing. But I recognized them, and the school principal told us it was the Queen, and we all got given new clothes and good food for the first time in months the day before she arrived. The day the Queen got to the school, I was part of a group of kids that went on a picnic with her and her husband and some of the priests. We went down to a meadow near Dead Man's Creek. I remember it was weird because we all had to bend down and kiss her foot, and she was wearing a white lace boot. After a while, I saw the Queen and her husband leave the picnic with 10 children from the school, and those kids never returned. They took away those 10 kids and nobody ever saw them again. We never heard anything more about them, and we never met them again even when we were older. They were all from around there, but they all vanished." The group that disappeared was 7 boys and 3 girls in age from 6 to 14 years old. They were all from the smart group in the class. 2 of the boys were brothers, and they were Métis from Quesnel. Their last name was Arnoux, or Arnold. I don't remember the others, just an occasional first name like Cecilia, and there was an Edward. What happened was also witnessed by my friend, George Adolph, who was 11 years old at the time and a student there too. But he's dead now. William Coombs, the sole survivor, was scheduled to appear as the star witness at the International Tribunal into Crimes of Church and State in London, England. But William Coombs never made it to the tribunal. He died of unknown causes shortly before he was scheduled to testify. Reverend Kevin Annett, a former minister of the United Church of Canada, believes that William Coombs was murdered to stop him from speaking out about the royal abductions and other crimes of murder and torture that he had witnessed at the school.
In a nutshell, what happened was I was letting people speak from the pulpit about the crimes I'd seen in the residential school, the murders and that. I also found out about the land deals that were happening where the church was selling off native land to big logging companies for kickbacks. And I wrote a letter about that to the church. I was fired without cause and eventually thrown out of the church without any due process at all. But that one thing led to another, and I began to work a lot more with the survivors after that, the eyewitnesses to these crimes.
It's August on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in western South Dakota, and the annual powwow is in full swing. The celebration is a highlight for the Oglala Sioux tribe, bringing together thousands of Native Americans to sing, dance, and honor their traditional culture. Tonight's good cheer, however, is in stark contrast to everyday life in one of the most difficult places to live in the United States. Few people in the Western Hemisphere have shorter life expectancies. Males on average live to just 48 years old, females to 52. Almost half of all people above the age of 40 have diabetes, and the economic realities are even worse. Unemployment rates are consistently above 80%. In Shannon County, inside the Pine Ridge Reservation, half the children live in poverty, and the average income is $8,000 a year. But there are funds available, a federal pot now worth more than $1 billion that sits here in the U.S. Treasury Department waiting to be collected by 9 Sioux tribes. The money stems from a 1980 Supreme Court ruling that set aside $105 million to compensate the Sioux for the taking of the Black Hills in 1877. They're an isolated mountain range rich in minerals that stretch from South Dakota to Wyoming. The only problem, the Sioux never wanted the money because the land was never for sale.
The Black Hills are very important to the Sioux Indian tribes because they are the spiritual center of Sioux people.
For tribal attorney Mario Gonzalez, the compensation fund is the embodiment of Indian mistreatment by the U.S. government, and the taking of the Black Hills was the gravest sin of all.
The Sioux tribes have always maintained that confiscation is illegal and that the tribes must have some of their ancestral lands returned to them.
Compared to the natural resource-rich Black Hills, the reservations the Sioux were relegated to are mostly dry, desolate landscapes. Shannon County has one of the lowest per capita incomes in the United States.
At one time, the Sioux Indians were a wealthy people, and they had, a place here that satisfied all their needs.
The land dispute dates back to 1868, when the U.S. signed a treaty at Fort Laramie that set aside the Black Hills as part of the Great Sioux Reservation. But when gold was discovered in the hills a few years later, the floodgates opened and Western pioneers poured in, and the Fort Laramie Treaty was broken.
There's a long history of treaties having been made with Indian tribes that were broken. Some would say that no treaty was ever kept with an Indian tribe.
Ross Swimmer served as a special trustee for American Indians during the George W. Bush administration.
It's been a psychological issue for all the Sioux tribes all this time, and much of that land is still owned by the federal government. And so the tribes are simply saying, well, wait a minute, you took our land, we want the land back.
Before I go on to what I really view as the interview, I want to take this opportunity to to do a public service, because there's this real propaganda blitz that's never ending, that denies that a lot of things have ever happened, denies that there's racism, denies that there's been genocide. I just saw the Wall Street Journal denying that the coup with Pinochet ever happened, and so just for the record on camera, in your opinion, is there racism?
Well, I mean, practically speaking, it's not even a question. It's a reality. So it's the way the world economic structure is ordered, set in motion. A great deal of that is based upon racism. When you look at the exploitation of so-called third world countries or countries of people of color. When you look at what America represents itself, it was racism. So racism is a very integral part of what's going on. Yeah, so it exists at every level. Yeah. You know, go back and find the numbers. You know, what percentage of people own all the wealth of the planet? And of that percentage of people, what color are they? You know, so I mean, so there's an obvious, and in relationship to the total population, what percentage does that number of people represent? And there's a vast disparity. That's why you have extreme wealth and extreme poverty. And if one just deals with reality, you know, obviously, you know, this century's, what is it, 21st century? This century's technological civilization exists where it does because of the gold they found on the people of the land of this hemisphere. And this is color. You know? Now, the whites may have done it amongst themselves before they came here. All right? Well, then maybe then it wasn't race. But when they did it to us, it was race. And when they did it to the black people, and they did it to the Asian, when they did it to the people of color, it was race. You know, it's not just economic, it's race. It's economics based upon race. So basically, the entire structure that we live in now is based upon, we're indoctrinated and programmed, all right, to perceive reality through a white, racially based subservient system to God, a male God. And that's what we see here. In other parts of the world, it's some other type of subservient system to their religion's male God. And so I think, you know, yeah, race has everything in the world to do with it. You know, it affects everything. Well, I think that the American people better prepare themselves for a new reality. I mean, either people are totally supportive of the way the government's behaving with its war-making policies, or they're outraged over it. The ones that are outraged seem to be surprised. And that surprise seems to be a part of the outrage. And what I think is, you know, that people just better get used to what's coming. Because my own personal opinion is that America is as close to Nazi Germany as close can get. I think we're in the 1,000-year Reich. I think that thing is for real. I think that in World War II, see, I look at it that on this planet there's an industrial Reich, and its bureaucracy is the corporate Nazi, and they create a class of ethnic rich. And this 1,000-year Reich thing is very important to them because that industrial ruling class that's on this planet, see, everything in the end runs through them, all development and progress. And anyway, this industrial Reich, they created a nationalistic Nazi to have World War II, Germany. And they created a nationalistic Nazi to sacrifice for the good of the global Nazi. Because creating the nationalistic Nazi, because to remember, Hitler, after World War I, Germany had these heavy restitution charges laid upon, reparations things laid upon them, outrageous reparations things. And then the value of the gold was shifted and changed, so that made the reparations even more after World War I. But yet, between World War I and World War II, Germany had enough money to build this incredible, massive killing machine. They had to get that money from somewhere. Somebody had to underwrite all of that because they were under these heavy debts. So I think the nationalistic Nazi was created because with the creation of the nationalistic Nazi, they altered the economy of Europe. It took them into the jet age, the age of antibiotics, the nuclear age. That war by itself just leapfrogged the Industrial Revolution by light years. Because, you know, like all the stuff that Mengele did with his medical experiments, or all the stuff that the German scientists did, when the Americans won, the Americans incorporated them in. Took their knowledge, their views, all of their stuff, incorporated all the knowledge, everything they had learned, the Americans incorporated into their worldview. Somebody gave all these Nazi war criminals sanctuary on the Western Hemisphere in Central and South America. See, so something going on to help. So I think the Nazi thing is a very real thing. I think where we're at now in this 1,000-year Reich venture was that in the 80s, the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, which created the World Trade Organization, well, the GATT is made up of 180 nations or so. But one of the things about joining the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs is that all the member nations have to agree that they will obey the decisions of the World Trade Organization. The decision-making process of the World Trade Organization, all national sovereignties become subservient to this. National sovereignty becomes subservient to these economic decisions made by the World Trade Organization. And the way that that filters down, you know, I was wondering, well, how are the American people going to take this when they find out that they won't have the right to demonstrate anymore? How are they going to take it when they find out that they're going to have to take wage cuts or that they're going to have to give up environmental protections because some organization is going to tell them that they have to? They're not going to accept this. Because as an example, it's like, let's say there's some company in Illinois, and Illinois has these strict environmental standards, but there's a country in Bulgaria that has no environmental standards. So that company can make a lot of money because it doesn't have environmental standards. On a global level, the company in Chicago can't compete with the company in Bulgaria. So they appeal, so they take this case to the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization can then turn around and say to the state of Illinois that you have to alter your environmental standards. And the state of Illinois has to do it. Because of these other decisions that were made. Now, so I figured, well, most people are going to object to this and they're going to rebel against it. And then, lo and behold, comes 9/11. They knock down those towers and attack the Pentagon building, and all of a sudden, you've got the USA Patriot Act, which makes it legal for the government to stop all dissent as it chooses to do so. All they got to do is call it a national security risk or a terrorist threat. And so someday some workers are going to want to go on strike for a better wage, and they're going to be called economic terrorists because they're threatening the economic stability of the corporation or whatever. Or people are going to try to protect their environment, and then be called terrorists for it. And all the laws through the Super Patriot Act, all the things are set in motion which makes it legal for the government to do this. See, all this is coming. All of this is coming. I'm telling you. You know, it's like they're going back to the Dark Ages. You know, the Dark Ages, the landlord, the royalty, the thief, the serf, the peasant. Going back to that. The disparity between the rich and the poor is getting larger and larger and larger. And as of the year 2000, there were close to 3 million people that were under some kind of custody, from being death row to wearing an electronic bracelet, or to just being on probation. By the year 2100, they expect that number to be 33 million people. One of the largest building industries taking place in this country now are prisons. Well, they're building, so But yet crime, when you look at crime, even no matter how high it gets and how the crime rates go, see, there seems to be a fluctuation on crime, but they're anticipating a much larger prison population. So that means, I interpret that to mean there are new crimes coming, right? That haven't. There's going to be a new definition of crime. The American people are in for a hard time. See, what the white people of America don't understand is that, see, they were given certain privileges for a couple, 200 or 300 years because their owners, right, their elite needed them to, number one, conquer the land, conquer the people, conquer the land, and then attack the land, attack the resources of the land, turn it into material, and have a certain productivity. So they needed the white people to do this. So they had to give them certain privileges. But now it's all gone global. They don't need the white people to do this anymore. They don't need them the same way they needed them before, so they're going to take the privileges away now. I mean, it's happening. It's happening all over the place. The job, you know, this is connected to the World Trade Organization. This is connected to the GATT. All the companies that are moving out of the U.S. and they're going over where they can hire people to work for $6 a day instead of paying somebody $15 an hour here and give them health insurance. The way this is all unfolding. So the white people in America are in for a big surprise. See, the majority of the blacks never got out of poverty, the majority of the blacks never made it out. The majority of the Indians never made it out. The majority of the Hispanics never made it out. They just allow enough of a percentage of us to make the so-called middle class thing, so you have a little makeup on. But the whites were allowed to make it out. Now they're going to get put back in. And when it happens to them, they're going to have a very violent, insane reaction to this. It's all in prisons they're building, and all these Super Patriot Act laws that they're passing now, the Sunset Law, all the stuff that they're passing now about the right to spy, the right to pick you up, to call you a terrorist. They don't even need to have, all they got to do is call you a terrorist. They don't have to show any proof. They just got to say it. Well, go read what the Inquisitions were. Do a study of what the Inquisitions were. It's the same thing. It's the very same thing. It just got a different shape. It's just dressed differently now. If you want to know where you're headed as a society, understand the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages of Europe. And then just make this middle transference about, well, add neon to it. Add neon and rubber wheels and air conditioning to it, right? They're going back to that system. That's where it's headed, in a major way. And the people of America, they just follow whatever promise they want to hear. They just follow whatever promise they want to hear. And so they've got something coming that's they're not ready for. They're not psychologically ready for it. They're not mentally ready for it. But those who would oppress us, they never stop. They're relentless. They're building the prisons now to get ready for what we're not ready for. But 30 million people by the year 2100, that'll probably be about 10% of the population.